All right.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Esoterica. I'm Leah Eichler, and I'm here with our editor in charge, Susan Cato. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with David Michael, author of the new book, Love Will Out. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, thank you. So, Dave, this is our second last podcast of the year. And actually, David, you're the last fiction writer that we'll have on this year. So tell us a little bit about your debut novel.
You want to hear a bit about the story?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. This is. I
Well,
mean, it's autobiographical. It's based on a true story, correct?
yeah, it's based on my parents' story and their grandparents. It starts off my mother's my mother's father. He was from Poland. He's a Poland Ashkenazi Jew, and my father's family, they're from Lebanon, just north in the mountains, just northeast of Beirut. And my Jewish grandfather, he came over at the end of the 19th century and settled in St. John's. And the Lebanese came just a few years after that, and they settled in St. John's. And they were both kind of escaping kind of persecution. They're my Polish grandfather from those Jewish devils, as he called them, kind of what's happening in Ukraine now. It's a very unfortunate situation, but the Russians were trying to interfere with their affairs. And so they left, and my Lebanese grandparents, they left because the Arab community, their predominant Arab community, they were giving them a hard time and wouldn't let them carry on the type of business they wanted to carry on. Were trying to take it over and complaining about it. Anyway, they applied for an exit visa and they wouldn't give it to them. So they had to kind of go by horseback through the mountains and stuff and ended up in Cairo, and then kind of took a boat over and landed in St. John's. So you get these two families coming from disparate parts of the world and joining in Newfoundland. And my mom and dad, they were offsprings of those two, and they met when they were very young and kind of fell in love. And the story tells their love story. It's a very tumultuous love story. It's not like a triangle. It's like a quintangle or whatever you call it. It's like 5 love affairs all kind of joined around, kind of a central theme. So it's overlapping. It's an unusual story. And 95% of what happens in the story in the book is true. Of course, when you're writing fiction, you add certain elements to make it more interesting for the reader and to make the dialogue kind of flow more readily and the plot line flow more readily, kind of thing. So,
well, I finished the novel recently, and I am surprised that 95% of it is true because there's a lot happening.
there is. I didn't find out about the story until my mom and dad passed away, and my aunt kind of sat me down and said, "David, I have something to tell you." And then she told me the story, and I won't give away the story for a reader who wants to read it, but it just came as a complete shock to me. I had no idea. I had a concept of my parents, and my feelings towards my parents didn't change, but I began to see a lot more of their background, and I kind of filled it out. And I said, "Oh, okay, so now I kind of understand why this happened." And the family, both sides of the family, kept it from us, which is very unusual because our family is, they love to talk and gossip.
Well, so give us a little bit of hint of what you're referring to, just for the readers that haven't, or the watchers that haven't read the book yet. Like, what are the juicy parts that are going to say, I got to read that book?
The juicy parts, let me see here now. It turns out that my mom was married to another man that I never knew before she married my dad. And there was a whole there was a whole part of our story, our history, that I didn't know anything about. And he wouldn't divorce mom. He was in love with her and wouldn't do it. But she was in love with my dad, and my father he was a merchant marine. My mom's first husband. And when he'd go away, my dad would move in and they had 3 children together. And I had no idea that their last name was different from our last name, and that my 3 older siblings were actually born with a different surname. So it came as a complete shock to me. And because my dad kind of committed a very grave misdemeanor, and mom said, well, the hell with you, and went off and married their best friend. And so that's kind of,
lots of different profiles. Gotcha. Okay, interesting, fascinating.
And then my mom's sister moves up from New York, and then the story takes a whole new turn. She, I mean, there's all kinds of things in the book. There's rape, there's murder, there's kind of loss of fortune. My grandfather kind of lost everything that he had. He was a very wealthy man, but he was a gambler, unfortunately, and absolutely lost everything. He ended up paying rent on his own house to the man who won the house in a poker game. So he had this sense of honor and lived by his word, but then lost everything. And the whole family had to live like that. And he died. Well, I won't say a pauper, but he died regretting this for his whole life. And all this happening, I had no idea about it. I remember my grandfather and everything. So when I was told the story, this turned out first as a musical. I'm kind of a musician as well. And I started writing it as a musical, but I was writing all the lyrics and all the music and the whole book and doing all the workshops. And it became too much for me. So a lot of my friends in the book business, publishing business, were after me to write a book. I had no interest in doing that, never did. And they just kept after me and after me and after me. You got to write. So one friend of mine, she's an editor. She said, look, I'll edit it for you for free. So I did a version. She threw half of it out. I did another version. She threw a quarter of that out. So then I did another version. And she said, well, you got a good story here. You're getting better. So I'm going to turn you on to another editor, a novelist editor. So she was awesome. She took the whole story and threw it up in the air, and all the parts landed all over the place. And I'm trying to figure out how the hell am I going to put all this together? I was so depressed. And I just sat down and okay, you got to do this. It's another challenge. You got to face this. So I went and I plodded along and came out with a novel.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating.
And you intend to make it a series? Is that going to be continuing with 95% real life? Yeah.
It's that story. The Love Will Out is the story of my mom and my grandparents and stuff. But the next are going to be based on my story. I've got 3 other books that are planned, and I've finished a draft of the second one. That's called Caritas, and that's my life, which starts basically when I was 16 years old, and that's a totally different story, completely different. And
did it get easier? I mean, would you say that if you gave this second draft to the first editor, would she still be throwing 50% out, or are you getting it now?
No, I don't. I know how to write a novel now. I mean, from everything, from publishing and everything. So when you're, when you're with a small publisher, you've got to get involved yourself. So the second one, I finished the draft of that. That's now in the hands of my editor. So she came back to me and said, "My God, like this is so different from what you first gave me." So I've definitely learned. I now know how to pace things and how characters are supposed to be, interact with each other. When you're not writing, you don't actually see that. You see the story and you like it, but how you put that together is very interesting. So I find it fascinating. I love writing. I write 4 to 6 hours every day, unless I'm being interviewed by you guys. And so it's I just love doing it. It's I'm retired. I'm an older man, so it's to publish your first book when you're 79 years old. It's quite unusual. So and I got 4 of the books planned, and they're all very, very different. And it's going to be quite a journey. I've had a very interesting life, and I've done so many different things. So it's great reliving it all. Reliving your 16-year-old self is pretty interesting, especially the world that I was in at that time when I was 16. It's like I trying to relive it has just been amazing. Actually, great experience. Everybody should do it.
Sorry, go ahead, Susan. Were you asking a question? I was wondering if you're still were you still living in Newfoundland at the time when you started? Were you still living in Newfoundland? I mean, this is a Newfoundland story, right? So, I mean, tell us a little bit about what it was like, for your parents in Newfoundland, and you grew up in Newfoundland as well, I assume. Correct?
Yeah, I grew up in Newfoundland, and my mom and the story in Love Will Out takes place in the 1920s and 1930s in Newfoundland, and it was very different then. It was St. John's was kind of it lacked a lot of the amenities that you had elsewhere. And when my Jewish grandfather came there, that's what made him stay, because he was a real entrepreneur. I mean, he looked at me and he said, "You don't have anything here," kind of thing. They barely got electricity, so and indoor plumbing and stuff. I grew up with very little of any indoor plumbing, and so he stayed there. He opened up a delicatessen. He opened up a movie theater. He was a ladies' tailor, like dressed the finest women in St. John's, and but it was very unusual. I mean, as a child, I lived amongst the sealers coming down from Labrador. I mean, I remember going down there and they're bringing in the seals and stuff, and all the fishermen from all over the world. The ships, kind of, big mass schooners. So I mean, they heard languages from everywhere. It was it was a port city, but it's kind of like where I grew up. I lived right down by the harbor. And so, I mean, basically, I lived right among the boats and everybody that came in there. So, I mean, I heard all kinds of different languages. Most people in St. John's had no idea that my world existed. They kind of lived up in the higher echelons, and we were kind of, the riffraff down at the harbor. So, it was very unusual. The 20s weren't too bad in St. John's because of the cod fishery, and because we exported cod all over the world. But then when the Depression came, that really hit St. John's hard. They even lost their government and had to be taken over by England and things like that. So it was, but it was a thriving little life. I mean, I had a great childhood. I mean, I spoke Jewish amongst my Jewish kind of relatives, Lebanese amongst my Lebanese relatives, and then, what I call it, East End towny drawl on the streets kind of thing. So it was we were the only family like that had Jewish and Lebanese. There were Jewish families, Lebanese families, but there were no intermix. So, I mean, I went around, celebrated all the different, Yom Kippur and things, and then also celebrated all the Christian, Eastern Rite Christians, which that's what they are. They're Eastern Rite. They're tied to Rome, but they don't accept the Pope. They have their own patriarch, but they have a lot of the Eastern rites, but they're very close to Catholicism, which is kind of the story I'm writing in my second book.
As a first-time author, did you get an agent?
That's what I'm doing now. No, I didn't get an agent. It's a small publisher, and I won't go into that. It's kind of, it's not a great story, and I had to kind of get really involved in it. I'm a businessman. I've been in business all my life, and I had various businesses. And so I kind of looked at it from that perspective, kind of looked at myself as a product, and kind of, I have to get out there. So I had to do a lot of the work myself. So now I'm actually talking to 4 literary agents, and some that are interested in the stories. A lot of them are kind of tied to Hollywood and the TV and film industry. They really like the stories of the first book, Love Aloud, and the second book, Caritas. They love those stories. So it's a long process. I don't know where it's going to lead, but they're great. They love the process. I've been, I contact them all the time. They contact me. We've had a lot of Zoom chats back and forth. So it's to see how it's done. I mean, I'm very realistic. I'm not expecting this, to hit this, but it's a process. I find it interesting. I just like going through different processes. And just seeing what's involved in them and getting into other people's worlds. And I mean, I'm not looking for anything, to happen on that level, but just being in that world and talking to people. And, I have some experiences myself, so it's really nice chatting, and I have a great time doing that. But so that's a whole other thing that I push, and aside from writing. So I do a lot of the promotion myself. I hired a publicist. And
I was going to ask that, when you do publish with a very small press, what has been your process of getting the word out?
Well, you have to do most of the work yourself. I mean, if my publisher didn't have access to retail, so I had to do all that myself. So I hired a publicist, and we got on the Indigo CA website and into some Indigo stores, store down in Newfoundland, chapters. It's chapters down there. And so I got into that store, and it's also on the Indigo. My book is on indigo.ca, Love Will Out. and it's on Amazon, of course, and it's on my website. I'll plug that. David Michael, my name, .ca. Real easy, davidmichael.ca.
Wow, I'm so impressed that you were able to score that.
When the CA first came out, I was, I think, the first one to grab it. So I went in there and got that, and it's, I mean, I've had that now for about 30 years. And every year I kind of, I used to sell my music through that, and I had CDs and things, so I used to do all of that. And but my publicist, who was great, I think my publicist was Chris Houston was the one who contacted you, and he's gotten me various interviews, some print. There's a couple, the Miramichi magazine journal, I think it is, literary journal down in the East Coast. They're writing an article. They're Down Home magazine in St. John's. They're a Newfoundland magazine that goes all over the world where Newfoundlanders are. They're doing an article. So, you know, you have to do that. And you have to do the agent part. So I'm looking now for a publisher and, you know, another publisher kind of thing that has more, you know, ability to get the book to a wider audience. I mean, when I'm with me, she's done her best kind of thing. And it's an uphill battle to try to break into the big ones when you're small. So it's a lot of luck and a lot of pushing. And that's what I do. I kind of push gently. And, you know, and humbly and, you know, kind of know my place, but, you know, just go and have some fun. But if you are trying to get, you know, your book into a store, it is very difficult. It's a lot of leg work, and I'd rather write, to tell you the truth. So I do a lot of it. I do a lot of it with, through hiring people, and, which is an expensive proposition. And it's not easy for people who, you know, trying to rely on income from writing. I'm fortunate I don't have to do that. I have that, you know, and so I can kind of afford to do some things that a lot of people won't be able to do. And so it's a real battle. And but I mean, I enjoy that process too. I enjoy talking to people like you. I love doing that, especially you live right down the street from me.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
You know, I'm gonna run into each other. I used to own a pub actually on College Street for 21 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and just sold that actually just before COVID came. And
that was good timing.
Yeah, just at the right time. Yeah, some of you would know if you live in Toronto, Brass Taps. It's
yeah, definitely.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that was my pub for 21 years.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, you wouldn't have seen me. I was in the background. I was kind of like the, you know, the silent partner kind of thing. My partner, he did most of the work and things, and I was kind of in the background. I did a lot of the running around. But, you know, so I sold that, and then I've started writing. So now I'm a writer, hopefully.
Amazing.
And, yeah, so it's interesting, you know. So I wish anybody who's writing to keep on. But, you know, it is a difficult thing. But you know what? Don't think too far into the future.
Right.
Take it, you know, they say day at a time. It's a cliche, but that's what you got to do. And get your writing as making it as good as you can. Don't hold anything back. Put everything into it, you know, kind of, and push it and listen to people who know what they're doing and read a bunch. But like, try to be creative and push yourself. Don't take.
Do you have a favorite book that you're reading lately that you can recommend? What do you read?
Well, to tell you the truth, right now I'm writing. I read some Newfoundland. Wayne Johnson's a very good friend of mine.
Yeah, I saw that Wayne Johnson endorsed your book. That's quite. He's that's amazing.
Yeah. I was at a writers' festival in Newfoundland this summer. The writers at Woody Point. I don't know if you know that festival. It's a huge writers' festival, and it's one of the major writers' festivals in Canada. And I was one of the writers there, along with Tom Power was there, and Tom I've known for years, Rick Mercer, and Mary Walsh, and Des Walsh, and Wayne Johnson, and stuff. So we all hung out, and just after my book launch in St. John's, I went there and kind of had a great time. We were fun. We were the first ones to help fund that writers' festival 19 years ago at my pub. We put on fundraisers there. So we were the first ones to do that.
Amazing.
And Sheila Rogers, actually, and when she introduced me, that's what she said. Her and Steve Brunt, I don't know if you know Steve, anybody in the sports world would know him. And he's on Sportsnet, I think, on television. And anyway, he runs the thing. And Sheila and Steve introduced me. And Sheila and Steve, what's what they said, without, you know, David Michael and his partner, Dave Latham, you know, it's a good chance that this Writers' Festival would never have gotten going, because they got behind it. We didn't start it, but we got behind it and promoted it. And at that time, I was writing a newsletter out of my pub, kind of with all Newfoundland writers and musicians. They all came to the pub and played. It was a real Newfoundland center. So I had a newsletter I'd send out all the time. And everybody, all Newfoundlanders, if you named a Newfoundland writer, they read at my pub, Lisa Moore, everybody. So, so I know a lot of people, and they've been all very helpful and very supportive. And I got some great Bernice Morgan. Bernice, she wrote me a blurb. She's an elderly woman in her 90s, and she hasn't written a blurb in almost 20 years, she told me, but she was always really interested in the Michael family. Yeah, it's really interested in the Michael family in Newfoundland. And so she always liked that story. She didn't know the real story of the book, but she knew the family, and she agreed to do it. And she doesn't have a computer. She doesn't have a cell phone. She wrote me a letter.
That's fun. I think that sounds.
I know.
It's a real coming together of a lot of your lifetime interests.
Yeah.
Because you're writing about family members, is there a temptation to idealize them and their actions?
Good question. No, because I wanted to be as true as possible. I mean, everybody's story is interesting. If you dig deep enough, everybody in the world has an interesting story, even if they're drunk sitting at a bar, and that's all they do is drink. I mean, there's a story there. There's a story in every single person, and take the person as they are and delve into that story. And if you try to change that, well, then you're making them into somebody else, and then it's not a unique story. And so take that individual person and his quirks and his body language and his acne and his whatever. Yeah. And, so I approached it with that in mind. Of course, to make the story, you have to fictionalize some things, and you have to kind of make it so that, it fits the story. So it's, you do a few things like that, but I took mom and dad with all their talents and all their faults and everything else and put them into the story. So their story is the way it was, as much as I could recollect it, because I wasn't born at that time.
Right.
So, did any family members come out afterwards and get upset that you were airing this family laundry?
No, the opposite, actually, because I did my homework. I talked to all of them, and I said, now, look, this is a work of fiction, okay? Right. So it's not history. So there might be things in there like this dad, he didn't have two sisters. He had one sister or whatever. That's for the story. I don't need too many characters. So you pare things down a bit, kind of you do things like that. But no, because they were very supportive and really helped me. And, kind of they really got behind it. They were all at the book launch down in St. John's. And I had all the old family photos from Lebanon and from my father, my Jewish grandfather. He was a rabbi, as in the book. So, a lot of the Jewish community find that aspect interesting, because he's not your kind of idealized rabbi who kind of has all the answers to everything, and people go to them with their problems, kind of you could go to him with the problems, but you were going to get a very unusual answer. And he got into the dark side of life and loved his family, but just, got tied up with his vices. So, so the Jewish community like that, because it's a different take on being a rabbi, especially in Newfoundland 100 years ago, when the synagogues were just, they'd rent a room and that would be the synagogue for the day kind of thing. They had no building. So it was difficult for the Jewish community there until they built their own synagogue and, kind of, so it's, like that.
Well, I have to say, I'm fascinated. Reading it, I did not know that it was so autobiographical, and that is really interesting.
Yeah, no, it's great. There's the book.
These things really happened.
There's the book. And that's my mom and dad dancing right there on the cover.
Amazing.
That's them, kind of the entertainers, which in the book, kind of, they had the family band, which is true. We had our family band. Mom and my dad, the band, there's an Air Force base. It's not gone now. During the Second World War, the Americans built an Air Force base there. And they had all the entertainers from the time, kind of Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby and stuff would come to the base. My dad's band would be the backup band, the house band. So they would go down there and play for them and also play around the city. And there's this song that I played at my launch, and I'll send it to you. And I should have played a little bit of it here, but it's a song that just emerged. It's a recording of the Michael Family Band from the 1940s, and it's a recording of a song that was written by my uncle, Leo Michael. It's called What Chance Have I? It's a love story, and my father's singing it.
Wow.
And at the beginning of the song, he says, Marion, which is my mom, Marion, this is for you. I'm going to bring tears to my eyes now. So,
Oh, lovely.
Very nice.
Well, this has been really great. Yeah. Thank you, David. I mean, this has been really illuminating. Everyone, David Michael, Love Will Out. The book is available at Amazon, Indigo, and online at davidmichael.ca, the permanent website. And this has been lovely, and it's so fascinating to have a Newfoundlander author on our. I think you're probably the first Newfoundland who's been on our show. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing about the next three books as they come out.
Oh yeah, you'll hear from me again. Don't worry.
Thank you, David.
As long as I can keep going.
Yep. Well, everyone, until next week, thanks again. And this is Esoterica. We'll speak to you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.